Chapter 2837. A Dramatic Re-Encounter. 6. Yan Qing was at a total loss for words. "Oh, who did you buy it for?" The bracelet was clearly too feminine for him to wear. In an instant, Di Fui gave the bracelet a flick and shattered it into many tiny pieces. "I bought this because I'd like to hear the sound of it getting shattered." He then turned and swiftly left. His action had left Yan Qing and the owner speechless. Gu Shijio ended up choosing a pink translucent bracelet with a smooth texture. Its faint shades of scarlet complemented her fair skin rather well. The bracelet was a gift from Fan Qianshi, who had spent his entire savings of spiritual pearls on it. He was happy to see the bracelet on Gu Zijia's wrist and was finally able to put the previous bitter encounters behind him. Just like any other girl, Wu Qianyan would not object to the idea of jewelry as well. She was there with Gu Shijio and Fan Qianshi all day long. When she saw the pink bracelet dangling on Gu Zijia's wrist, she, too, wished she had one, but she never showed any interest. She looked around the jewelry shop and found a small jade hairpin that she actually liked, but the ridiculously high price scared her off. Quietly, she touched her empty purse and immediately realized that she would never be able to afford the bracelet in her lifetime. Nevertheless, before Gu Shijio made the payment, she asked the owner to pack for the jade hairpin as well. At first, Wu Qianyan thought that Gu Shijio liked the hairpin as well and had bought it for herself. Without batting an eyelid, she decided to remain silent, though she was quite disappointed on the inside. When everything was paid for, Gu Shijio waved at her and said, "Come here." Wu Qianyan did not know why her master had called for her, but she approached Gu Shijio regardless. "Master," she addressed Gu Shijio. Gu Shijio turned Wu Qianyan's body around so that she could put the hairpin in her hair. "This hairpin suits you quite well. I am giving this to you as a gift," she said while examining the outcome. Delightfully, Wu Qianyan thanked Gu Shijio for her kindness. She then turned to look at Fan Qianshi, hoping that he would pay her a compliment. But to her dismay, Fan Qianshi only threw her a quick glance and commented harshly, "It is incompatible." She was not sure what he actually meant by the word incompatible. Nonetheless, she trusted her intuitions, which told her that he was implying that the bracelet was too elegant for her to carry. After all, they had spent enough time together for her to understand his thoughts. There was a glimpse of disappointment in Wu Qianyan's eyes, but she soon got over it. Gu Shijio took a look at Fan Qianshi and shook her head. The boy had always been quite harsh on Wu Qianyan. He especially enjoyed it every time he knocked her down, to the point where he was basically tearing her up. The silly girl, however, still liked to stick around with him. What a pair of troubled friends, Gu Shijio thought. She actually wanted to match them up but had a feeling that it would not end well. Marriage could not be built without a common ground, so instead of injecting them with false hopes, she would like them to take their steps slowly and develop feelings for one another over time. For the past 20 years, Fan Qianshi's behavior had been acceptable enough. What he had for Gu Shijio was nothing short of respect. Furthermore, he did not cross any lines. Gu Shijio used to hold a strong guard against him, but slowly, she became more comfortable around him when she realized that he was no longer trying to woo her. Relieved, she was happy that the boy finally cleared his head. When she finally felt that it was time to move forward, she decided that it was time to take them both on a trip around all 6 worlds. When Fan Qianshi was 18, Gu Shijio once sent him out for missions alone. He was assigned with challenges of varying difficulties, but he could always accomplish them with flying colors, which made Gu Shijio proud. Birthdays are meant to be celebrated, regardless of race. And when a person was highly respected in the society, their birthday celebration would naturally become an important date to be remembered. Gu Shijio had walked the earth since the beginning of time, long enough for her to forget many things through the course of time. Although she no longer remembered when her birthday actually was, the kings from all 6 worlds and her disciples still insisted on celebrating her birthday. Firstly, the celebration served as an opportunity for a reunion. And secondly, they wanted to be closer to the creator of the universe. Chapter 2838. A Dramatic Re-Encounter. 7. Many people asked about her birthday before, but she could no longer remember the exact date. Encouraged by their constant requests, She decided to make the day of her awakening her birthday. Her birthday was not celebrated every year, but once every 5 years. During that time, her friends from all over the world would come to visit her in Tianin Valley to celebrate it with her. The 6 kings would be present every year, along with their government officials and entourages. The creator of the universe preferred serenity over hustles and bustles, so all birthday attendees would carefully choose their companions, with the selection restricted mostly to the people of social or political power. Tian Maoan was absolutely qualified to be one of the attendees, but he never cared to take part in the celebration for almost a decade. The Monster King and the Emperor Immortal had invited him to come but were both turned down. He was clearly reluctant, so they respected his decision. To everyone's surprise, he showed up this time. Both the Monster King and the Emperor Immortal were present, along with the King of the Underworld, the King of the Beasts, and the Mortal King. All of them were presenting their birthday gifts to Gu Shijio, who was seated in the highest chair in the Grand Hall. All of the kings were very competitive with their gifts. The trait was clearly reflected in the valuable gifts that they had brought with them. They all wanted to best each other so they could be seen as a leader of style and wealth. Fan Qianshi was assigned to receive the gifts and found himself rather occupied. While collecting the gifts, a boy servant from outside of the hall came reporting, "Mr. Fui is here for your birthday, my divine lord." Everyone looked at one another, unsure of the identity of the guest. It was only Gu Shijio who realized that the man could be Tian Maoan. He once introduced himself as Di Fui to her. Could it be him? Soon, a man in purple robes gracefully entered the hall. Tushan Ying and the Emperor Immortal were both surprised by his sudden entrance and stood immediately. The Celestial Officer. The National Master. Quite astonished, the newcomer was indeed Di Fui. He decided to show his true appearance this time. There was no mask to conceal his charming and handsome face. He dominated the hall with the sheer aura of his character, and the place immediately bloomed with light. It had been years since Tushan Ying last saw him. The first sight of him immediately reminded her of the 11 beatings that she had suffered years ago. The Emperor Immortal was surprised to see him too. Delightfully, he greeted him, "National Master, I did not know that you were coming today. Have a seat here." Others rose and approached him with small talk as well, while Gu Shijio watched as the whole event unfolded. The past 20 years had completely shaped him. He was no longer had the youthfulness of being young. Instead, today he presented himself with strength, maturity, and most certainly his charm. Times had changed him. He had become a highly sought-after man in all 6 worlds. She thought about how Mr. Fui had introduced himself and wondered if he was using his original name from now on. Then she subconsciously thought of the emerald bracelet that she could not get from the shop where she last bumped into the man. Honestly, she liked the hues of green very much and was a little sad that the same tone of color could no longer be found anywhere else. Rarely would she actually like something so much, but when she finally found it, the deal was blown. As for Fan Qianshi, he was obviously repelled by the newcomer. He should be serving the guests, so it was supposed to be his job to host the man, but he could not bring himself to approach him. When his eyes finally caught Di Fui's, Fan Qianshi immediately raised his chin to show the man some authority. Back when they were arguing for the bracelet, Fan Qianshi was disguised as a common man, so there was nothing he could do even when he was bullied. Nevertheless, in this hall, he was the disciple of the creator of the universe, so his status was definitely higher than the so-called national master. He deserved to be a little arrogant. Chapter 2839. A Dramatic Reencounter, 8. Wu Qianyan did not find Di Fui appealing as well. She had no scruples about her feelings toward him and casually added, "As the national master of the Celestial Kingdom, why didn't you come with the Emperor Immortal? Isn't it inappropriate to come later than the Emperor Immortal himself?" Usually, the Emperor or the King's men would either arrive first or together with their leader, but never later. In fact, Di Fui's delay was quite disrespectful to the Emperor Immortal. Wu Qianyan had a point, but Di Fui was not concerned about it. Instead, he took a glance at the Emperor Immortal to see if he had anything to add. The Emperor Immortal knew that he had to say something to dissolve the awkwardness. He quit his position as the national master almost 6 months ago. He is not one of us now. This announcement came as a shocking revelation to the crowd who were unaware of this change in status. All of them wanted him to stand by their respective kingdoms, as a talent like Di Fui was hard to come by. Tu Shan-ing was the first to voice her interest. All of a sudden her back pain was no longer an issue. She cordially invited him to come by the Monster Kingdom, as the position as the celestial officer had always been his for the taking. Others from the underworld, the Devil Kingdom, and the mortal world chimed in eagerly. In order to persuade him, all of them started sharing about the good sides of where they came from. It then became a rather heated debate. Fan Qianshi was quite annoyed. Was Tian Maoan here to ruin the party? It was supposed to be a birthday celebration for the god of creation, but the center of attention had been shifted to the newcomer instead. He took a look at Gu Shijio, who was still in her high chair. Master, should we send the troublesome man away? He directed an audio to her. With her chin rested on one hand, Gu Shijio casually answered, not necessary. He is considered as our guest. Eventually, Di Fui had to cease the violent exchange of diverging views with a clap. Everyone, I am here to wish the Divine Lord happy birthday. If you'd like to keep arguing, please do it outside. There was a sense of authority in his voice that made it sound quite intimidating. A long pause immediately followed. Nevertheless, in order to please him, they all pretended as if nothing had happened and went on with some fake laughs. They claimed that they were only inviting Mr. Fui over to their kingdoms as a guest and not for business purposes. Instantly, they stopped arguing with one another and apologized to Gu Shijio. Politely, Gu Shijio waved her hand to dismiss it. And just like that, the place was once again filled with only joy and laughter. All but for Fan Qianshi, who was still not happy. He had a feeling that Mr. Fui was not here to join the birthday celebration but to hold a demonstration. Was he trying to show the Divine Lord how popular he was? Alarmed, Fan Qianshi was suddenly alert of the potential danger. Di Fui had successfully established his popularity in 2 different kingdoms. Slowly but surely he would unite the people of all 6 worlds and emerge as their ruler, like an uncrowned king. There was a chance that he would surpass his master if he kept this up. Annoyed by the thought, he made a promise to himself that he would never see it happen. The only ruler of all 6 worlds was the creator of the universe, not the man who he loathed on sight. Di Fui looked at Gu Shijio and presented her with a brocade box. Divine Lord, I hereby wish you a happy birthday. The gift is a little something from me, I hope you like it. The brocade box was very eye-catching, so the people around them immediately assumed that the item in the box was something valuable. On the other hand, Gu Shijio felt troubled at the sight of him. She could tell that Mr. Fui did not show up out of the blue for nothing. He must be working on something, though she had yet to figure it out. He was still waiting for her to accept the gift, so she asked Fan Qianshi to take it. Reluctantly, Fan Qianshi stepped forward. Di Fui, however, backed up instead. Divine Lord, this gift is of immeasurable value, so I do not wish to see it getting in someone else's hands. Please accept the gift personally. Fan Qianshi was clearly angered. Tian Maoan, you are out of line. The Divine Lord did not even accept the Emperor Immortal's gift personally. Chapter 2840. A dramatic birthday celebration. Di Fui calmly explained, I am not the Emperor Immortal, I am Di Fui. I am no longer Tian Maoan. Perhaps I should put it this way. Tian Maoan is just a name for one of my many embodiments. My real name is Di Fui. Fan Qianshi looked at him in disbelief, for he could not figure out the significance of his real name to the conversation they were having right now. Gu Shijio interrupted the feud between the 2 men. Qianshi, there is no need to trouble him. It is merely a gift, I can handle it. She did not leave her seat but used a spell to summon the box from Di Fui's hands. Quickly, she then flicked the cover open, revealing the gift inside that was shining brightly with great brilliance. The entire hall was immediately brightened up, anticipating the nature of the present. Even Gu Zijia's body was dazzling with the light emitted from the box. Breathlessly, she looked at the items in great astonishment. The box contained a full set of jewelry, a hairpin, a pair of earrings, a pendant, and a bracelet. Everything was in a uniform shade of emerald, perfectly arranged in the box to showcase its delicate work and exquisite material that had the reflective quality for light. Gu Shijio had seen many great things but had never come across such a set of jewelry made of jade. She could not even tell the origin of such magnificent pieces of jade, as the items were even more beautiful than anything that she had ever seen. More importantly, all these pieces were carved from the same rock, which explained why all of them shared the same brilliance and intensity, sparkling like the many stars in the sky. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was not the only one who was captivated by the gift. Many in the hall stared at it in awe. The bracelet that Gu Shijio had seen before was priced at 10,000 spiritual stones, which was incomparable to the value of the pair of earrings in the box. Even with the least amount of jade, its value was worth at least 1,000,000 spiritual stones. The rest would be even more expensive. The actual value of the entire jewelry set could easily be more than 10 million spiritual stones, so the gift was indeed a great one, catching many eyes in the hall. In fact, the value of all the gifts by the other guests combined was not even worth half of the value of the jewelry set. Gu Shijio generally fancied all kinds of jewelry. Every time she visited the 6 worlds, she would pick a few that she liked. Money was never a problem for her. Hence, she knew a good piece of jewelry when she saw one. Being familiar with the craftsmanship, she could easily tell whose work the jewelry was as soon as she saw the details. However, this time around she could not recognize the craftsmanship at all. The jade hairpin was as slender as the crescent moon. The earrings were in the same shape as a 6-point star. As for the necklace, it looked like the Milky Way with clusters of stars dangling across the chain. Lastly, the jade bracelet was beautifully crafted with magnificent details that formed a great picture of the galaxy. The theme of the craftsmanship was rather fresh though odd. But like nature itself, it was the highest quality of art that she had seen. With the jewelry set in her hand, she felt as though she was holding the entire starry sky in one grasp. After a few moments of astonishment, she finally looked at Di Fui doubtfully, for she could not believe he was actually giving the jewelry away to her. When she first took it, she thought that there would be something scary or embarrassing in the box. She had perhaps been a little unfair to the innocent man. She took a deep breath before asking, "May I know the craftsman behind these exquisite pieces of jewelry?" Di Fui gave her a quick smile. Full of pride, he said, "Could there be any craftsman who is even better than me? Did you make these?" Gu Shijio was stunned. "Surely I did." Gu Shijio and all of her guests certainly did not see that answer coming. Chapter 2841. A dramatic birthday celebration. 2. No one knew that the national master-cum-celestial official was not only great in his political career but also an outstanding craftsman. The supreme quality of the intricate details of the jewelry set was a marvel to behold. Many eyes were focused on Di Fui, mostly in surprise and adoration. Some still refused to believe him. The hall was so quiet that everyone could hear Tushan Ing sighing. "I did not know that you intended to use my family heirloom for crafting purposes. I thought you were going to use it to mend the sky." Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. However, it was still loud enough for the entire hall of quiet people to hear. "What do you mean?" Gu Shijio asked. Tushan Ing first looked at Di Fui, but he remained expressionless. He did seem to want to stop her from explaining herself. "Divine Lord, I used to have a great piece of jade in my family, known for its ability to mend the sky a long, long time ago. The jade is enriched in the essence and spiritual energy of heaven and earth, thus unifying the greatness of all 5 elements in one, making the jade a source of spiritual energy. Even if a place is highly depleted in spiritual energy, its presence alone can enhance the energy in the area." Everyone was stunned, for they did not know that the jade was actually a goldmine of spiritual energy. To them, the source of spiritual energy was the force that sustained their survival. Many people had looked everywhere in search of a steady source of spiritual energy, which also became the cause of many wars between different kingdoms. With the jewelry, there was no need for her to look for another source of spiritual energy. Those who were sensitive to the presence of spiritual energy could already feel the power lingering in the air. There seems to be a great increase of spiritual energy in the hall. Even in a changed form, the set of jade jewelry still had the same power to fill the air with immense energy. Many people began looking at the jewelry in utter admiration. If the jewelry were not in the hands of Gu Shijio, some of them would already be fighting with one another to own it. Still surprised, Gu Shijio gazed at Di Fui in astonishment. "Did you make these especially for me?" With a smile, Di Fui carefully avoided the question. "Do you like it?" he asked instead. "I do. That is all that matters. Promise me one thing. The set of jewelry will be yours to keep," he suddenly said via directed audio. Gu Shijio somehow knew what he would say so. She looked at him in the eye and answered, "What is it that you want in return? Should I take back our agreement as master and disciple?" Di Fui gently nodded. "You should know how helpful these jade pieces are to you. With these, you can skip your annual trip to the glacier." By wearing the jewelry consistently for 12 hours, you will get the same health benefits of spending one whole day in the glacier. If you place these in the Tianin Valley, it will also strengthen the wizardry barrier to the point where it is indestructible. As long as you take back the agreement, the whole set will be yours. The offer was rather tempting, so for that, Gu Shijio agreed. "Are you really that reluctant to become my disciple? I know that you do not wish for anyone to know of it, so I have never told anyone. I have never used the controlling spell on you either." She was quite hurt by his rejection, actually. "There would not be any downside for you if you become a disciple of mine. Why are you so against it?" "Divine Lord, an agreement can only be reached when both parties agree to it. Why do you keep forcing me to agree to something I am unwilling to accept?" Di Fui looked at her sternly. Gu Shijio took a moment to think about his offer. She knew the gift was enough to show how sincere he was, but she could not fulfill his request. She then sealed the box away. Chapter 2842, A Dramatic Birthday Celebration, 3. The gift is too valuable for me to keep. Please take it back. Gu Shijio waved her hand and returned the box to Di Fui. Di Fui did not see the rejection coming. He could not believe that Gu Shijio would turn down her offer. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio no longer wanted to stay in the hall as she looked away and said, "Please excuse me. I'm quite tired now. Qianshi and Qianyan, please make our guests feel at home." She then disappeared almost instantaneously. The crowd was confused and lost by how things unfolded. The conversation between Gu Shijio and Di Fui was strictly for their ears only, so no one heard what they said. Perplexed, they turned to Di Fui for an answer. Di Fui stared at the box blankly for a while before laughing out loud. He then left as well. Gu Shijio was having a drink. The wine that she drank was produced by Fan Qianshi, which was made from bamboo leaves. It had been kept in the wine cellar for almost a decade now. Fan Qianshi was a very thoughtful man. As soon as he realized that Gu Shijio liked to drink, he immediately searched for the best winemakers to learn how to become a brewer. After that, he personally made a few bottles of wine for Gu Shijio and kept them in the cellar, until now. It was the first time that Gu Shijio tasted the wine, and she was immediately drawn to its taste. She then decided to open 3 bottles of wine and spend her time drinking in the garden alone. After Fan Qianshi escorted all of their guests out, he then found her leaning against the pillar with 3 empty bottles around her. "Master?" he called out softly. Motionlessly, Gu Shijio still had her eyes closed. Nevertheless, the strong smell of wine on her body clearly indicated that she was drunk. "Master, this place is too chilly and cold for you to sleep. Shall we go back?" Fan Qianshi took 2 steps forward and stood next to her. She remained unresponsive, her beautiful lashes drooped with tiredness, while her cheeks remained scarlet. The air was actually filled with the fragrance of the wine and her sweet scent. Fan Qianshi gazed at her intensely before lowering his body to hold her. "Master, I shall send you back to your room." His fingers made contact with her arms. Even if it was only a minor physical contact, he could not stop his heart from racing in excitement. Even though Gu Shijio no longer had her guard up against him, there was hardly any physical contact between them. Even during practice, She would usually demonstrate the moves for him to see rather than guiding his movements with her hands. There would only be physical contact when she punched at him violently. He would end up with bruises on his face with the slightest distraction. Therefore, he was not exactly excited about the violent part of their physical contact. For so long, he never had second thoughts about her. But all of his defenses were shattered, now that she was drunk. Slowly, he lifted her. She was surprisingly obedient when she was not fully conscious. She merely peered at him while leaning against his shoulder. The place was about 200 meters away from her room. Fan Qianshi could have easily used a spell to cover the entire distance in less than 30 seconds, but he chose to walk her through the garden. He secretly wished for the journey to be longer. Everything came to an end, eventually, when they arrived in her room. He then put her down on her bed. He even moved her legs onto the bed as well and lifted the covers. He was ready to leave when Gu Shijio started talking in her sleep. "But why do you refuse to be my disciple?" Gu Shijio whispered in despair. Chapter 2843. The banishment. Fan Qianshi was moved. "Master, I am your disciple. I have always wanted for you to become my master ever since we first met." He quickly reflected on their past encounters and softly said, "I was young and naive. I knew I could trust you, but I was too arrogant to admit it. I wanted to be asked. I liked it when people begged for me to accept their offer, but you were different. Before I found out about your identity, I secretly hoped that you would ask me again to become your disciple, like everyone else." He talked about the past and sighed in relief. "Am I not good enough? Do you know that there are many who wish to become my disciple? I have never agreed to any of them." Amused, he thought that his reluctance had left a mark in her heart, for he knew that Gu Shijio was telling the truth. From time to time, the rulers of all 6 worlds would send her some children who were deemed to be talented. They wanted her to select them as candidates to become her disciple. Due to her strict selections, most of them were sent back. Some begged to stay, even as her servants. Due to the lack of manpower in the Tianyin Valley, eventually, a dozen children stayed behind. Occasionally, she would teach them some moves that would benefit them in many ways. Fan Qianshi looked at Gu Shijio with proudness and gratitude in his eyes. He thought that he was her only disciple, and he would very much like it to stay that way. But suddenly, Gu Shijio murmured, "Di Fui." Fan Qianshi was greatly surprised. "Di Fui, Tian Maoan or Jiai? Which is your real name?" Fan Qianshi had no words. "Is it really embarrassing for you to become my disciple? You see, I have never told anyone that you are my disciple in the past 20 years. So why must you insist that we break off this agreement?" Gu Shijio was still trapped in the depths of her dream. The news definitely came as a shocking realization to Fan Qianshi. "Master, what are you saying? Was Di Fui once your disciple as well?" He asked in a trembling voice while eagerly waiting for an answer. He had to use a spell on her that would make her tell the truth, even in her dreams. Normally, he would never find the courage to do so. After all, Gu Zijia's kung fu was many times stronger than his, so there was no way he could charm her with the spell. Furthermore, he would not risk getting beaten up. But right now, desperate times called for desperate measures. "He refused it," Gu Shijio murmured. Fan Qianshi started clenching his fist in irritation. "Why does he refuse to acknowledge you? If he is really reluctant, how did the agreement even happen?" The color from his face started fading. It all started with a joke and a bet. Fan Qianshi had to take a deep breath before continuing. "Master, you can easily have anyone become your disciple, so why must you force the man? If he is really against it, you can just banish him." "I cannot do so. The agreement was assigned to me by the heavens, so I cannot banish him, or we will both be punished by a catastrophe." Fan Qianshi was speechless. He did not understand anything that she just said. "Master, do you really need the heavens' approval before accepting a disciple? Have I got the same approval?" "No, you have not," she answered honestly while shaking her head. Fan Qianshi was devastated. "I am your only disciple, and yet I have not been approved by the heavens." He refused to believe it. Chapter 2844. The Banishment, 2. Not all disciples receive the same approval from the heavens. I actually do not quite understand why he was the only one who did. Fan Qianshi had nothing to say. He stood there, feeling as dumb as a piece of wood. It took him a while to break out of the bewilderment he was trapped in. Finally, gentle winds went through the window, tickling his face with the chillness of the night and rescuing him from his preoccupation. He shifted his body toward her while looking at the woman on the bed. Gu Zijia's mind had already deepened into a sound sleep. She looked very innocent, with her cheeks were still blushing in tints of cherry pink. Her long dark eyelashes lightly traced her eyes into two curved lines. Tantalized by her beauty, he whispered, "Master." In that brief second, desire had clouded his mind. He looked at Gu Shijio intensely, while he bent down towards her. With every second, his body moved closer to Gu Zijia's. His lips were almost touching her deliciously supple lips that he had been longing for all this while. But abruptly, her eyes were wide open. Their eyes met, but the look in her eyes was dead cold. The color immediately faded from Fan Qianshi's face. Gu Shijio up from the bed and was obviously furious. She almost pushed Fan Qianshi up against the wall behind him. "Fan Qianshi, how dare you use the illusionary spell on me? Have you forgotten that I am your master?" Gu Zijia's power as the creator of the universe was not to be underestimated. She might be defenseless while she was asleep, but that did not mean that she was unaware of her surroundings. Admittedly, she did not expect Fan Qianshi to have the courage to use the spell against her. Most importantly, she was not the one who had taught him how to use the illusionary spell. "Damn it, you are still young, and yet you do not know how to behave." She was infuriated by his crazy attempt to kiss her while she was asleep. She honestly thought that he had gotten over her. Little did she know that the feelings that he had for her were always there. He just never expressed himself. Unfortunately, Gu Shijio could no longer suppress her anger. She waved her hand and struck him, hitting him right onto the wall. He was struck so hard that dust from the wall covered his entire body. Fan Qianshi did not use any spell to protect himself. He suffered the full wrath of Gu Zijia's anger. As soon as he landed outside, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He knew the severity of his mistake, so he continued to stay on the ground. "Master, I know my mistake. Please punish me. I deserve this," he pleaded. The young servants made their way to the scene and saw a rather tense exchange. Dumbstruck, no one knew what had happened. They had never seen her trembling in such a manner before. All of them kneeled on the ground, begging for her to calm down. But Gu Shijio was unable to hold back her anger. To be more specific, it was her disappointment at the man. She had high expectations for Fan Qianshi. Apart from his inclinations for fame and power, he was a considerably good candidate to be her successor. It was reasonable for the creator of the universe to chase after power and influence, as long as he or she remained kind-hearted and compassionate for all. There really was not much time left for her. She thought she had already found a successor to her role, so she really did put in a lot of effort to teach and guide him, but he turned out to be a disappointment after using the illusionary spell on her while she was drunk. Severe punishment was unavoidable so that he could learn from his terrible mistake. "Fan Qianshi, from now on, you will no longer be my disciple. Now leave." Gu Shijio issued an ultimatum. Fan Qianshi trembled with a dumbfounded look on his face. "Master, you may punish me, kill me, or even dismember me if you have to, but please do not banish me, I beg you." Fan Qianshi found himself kneeling on the ground while pleading for forgiveness. Desperately, he wanted to hug Gu Zijia's legs, but the idea of another physical contact intimidated him. Gu Shijio did not answer him. Instead, she tossed him even further away. The impact was so profound that Fan Qianshi lost consciousness for a while. When he got up, he found himself on the field outside of the Tianyin Valley. Chapter 2845. The Banishment, 3. Gu Shijio was there, looking at him sternly. She then reached out for his face, and streaks of 7-colored rays slowly emerged. Fan Qianshi stayed frozen. He wanted to avoid her but was unable to move. The seven-colored ray slowly penetrated his head, giving him a terrible headache. Something in his brain had been forcefully shattered and removed. It was a physical torment that he could no longer endure, so he was seen struggling. Soon, Gu Shijio removed her hands from his face. You are no longer my disciple because of your profoundly stupid action. From now on, we are no longer associated. She removed some of his memories so that he could not remember what she said to him when he had used the illusionary spell on her. She then walked away and went back into the Tianyin Valley. The wizardry barrier was once again sealed. Fan Qianshi spent the next 10 days kneeling and begging for forgiveness. He had not eaten or drunk anything. The only phrase that he kept repeating was, "Master, I know my mistake now. Please do not banish me." Fan Qianshi was well known in the Tianyin Valley, so most of them stood by him in this time of his hardship, including Wu Qianyan. All of them begged for him to be forgiven. Stubbornly, Gu Shijio refused to dismiss the ultimatum. She also did not allow anyone to go outside and see him. Wu Qianyan decided to take the risk of being punished. She sneaked outside the barrier to feed him with food and water, but Fan Qianshi refused her offer. Only with Gu Zijia's forgiveness would he rise to his feet. Otherwise, he would keep on kneeling until the end of time. As days went by, he slowly weakened. Wu Qianyan and his friends were on their toes, waiting for him to return. They kept trying to help him by trying many different ways to convince Gu Shijio to change her mind. In order to stop the hassle once and for all, Gu Shijio issued a warning to everyone. Whoever who helps Fan Qianshi will be banished, just as same. The warning finally solved many problems for her. Most of the servants were too timid to say anything more. Perhaps, it was only Wu Qianyan, who was still stubborn. She continued to ask Gu Shijio to forgive him, so she ended up being banished as well. Therefore, the two banished people joined hands as they kneeled on the outside of the wizardry barrier. Gu Shijio felt bad for Fan Qianshi as well. After all, he was the only disciple that she had ever trained since her return. Moreover, he was also the only successor that could take over her role. But Fan Qianshi had really crossed the line, which was something she could no longer tolerate. She needed to give him a hard lesson so that he would not do anything reckless in the future. Her spiritual power was well maintained at 20% of her overall strength, which was still enough to overpower him. By the time her power was reduced to an unprecedented low, there was no way she could be sure that he would not do bad things against her will, by force. The relationship between a master and a disciple was not something against the social norm, but Gu Shijio had never felt it that way about Fan Qianshi. Additionally, she would like to avoid getting all tangled up with her own disciple right before her dying days. Although Fan Qianshi seemed like a gentleman, his views generally tended towards the extreme. If he really wanted something, there was no way he would change his mind. If the situation went on, she could not be sure if he would do something extreme to mourn her death. Hence, she really needed him to get rid of his unhealthy thoughts about her. However, she was not quite sure about what to do now as the relationship issue was indeed a headache for her. Her mind was in a tumult, so she decided to isolate herself to study the sky and the stars. She could foresee the rise and fall in all 6 worlds through the relative positions of celestial bodies. She had been studying astrology since 8 years ago when she recovered her knowledge about the suns, moons, and planets. In the depths of Tianyin Valley, there was a cave. It was the place for her to study the stars. Some fractions of her memory were still missing, so she could not understand some of the constellations. Nevertheless, in time, she believed that her understanding would be slowly improved. Chapter 2846. The catastrophe. Gu Shijio had been busy teaching her disciple while also finding time to meditate in the glacier, so there was hardly any time for her to sit down and study the stars. Without her disciple around now, she could finally find time for a few moments of peace. She spent the entire month in the cave studying the constellations and finally had some clues. The result was not exactly positive. She found the 6-pointed star that symbolized her presence. As expected, its brilliance was slowly fading. The star was hanging at the edge of the sky as if it were about to sink anytime soon. There was not much time left for her here. Among the innumerable dots of light in the sky, she found another two big ones. One glowed in purple hues while the other was obscured by a layer of dark clouds, which made it seem rather peculiar. Gu Zijius sat and watched the purple star, which reminded her of something familiar. Usually, a newborn star would not be stable enough to have a consistent level of brightness. Like glitches, the relative position would be rather unpredictable due to its instability. The purple star was obviously a newborn, but somehow it was already in a perfect state. Every aspect of the star was stable and consistent, in terms of brightness and its elliptical course. Its orbit was also systematic and precise. Gu Shijio then observed the newborn star that was slightly obscured. Though stable, it was not as good as the purple star. The movement of other stars around it easily affected its course, thus altering its orbit. As of this moment, it was moving slightly away from its elliptical course, but not entirely derailing. The obscured star must be symbolizing Fan Qianshi. But what about the other star? She thought about Di Fui and began questioning if it could really be him. Could he become a supreme being in the future? Could he be ruling all 6 worlds along with Fan Qianshi? Her knowledge about astrology used to be terribly blurry, but luckily, her relentless revision was able to help her recall the knowledge that she once mastered. Unknowing to her, an entire month had passed. Just like every other day, she was observing the star chart again when all of a sudden, the layer of black fog obscuring the star started to separate. Soon, it began to shatter, like a streak of lightning had just struck it. No, damn it! Gu Shijio cursed as soon as she figured out the reason. She teleported right away to the other end of Tianyin Valley. On the outside of Tianyin Valley, rolling red clouds started to fill the sky, turning it into a fiery view. Mighty flashes of lightning could be seen in the mass of clouds covering the sky. A violent disturbance of strong winds began to rage the land. Fan Qianshi was captured in a bubble of a fiery red barrier that was slowly rising into a sky. Flashes of lightning began to surround him, but he still sat in the bubble with his eyes closed, seemingly at ease. Soon enough, he was hit by the first streak of lightning and spat out a mouthful of blood. He refused to hide or to avoid getting hit. Instead, he chose to endure these streaks of catastrophic lightning. What an idiot, Gu Shijio thought. She immediately teleported closer to him and said, "Fan Qianshi, are you trying to get yourself killed?" Gu Shijio was now right outside of the red bubble. Although he was already an upper immortal, his power might not be enough to sustain him throughout the entire catastrophe, accounting for 49 bolts in total. He did not even have his protective barrier around him. The man was clearly putting himself at risk. As soon as Fan Qianshi heard her voice, he opened his eyes and said in a hopeful tone, "Master, have you forgiven me?" Irritated, Gu Shijio was rendered speechless by his idiocy, but it was not the right time to discuss that. "Fan Qianshi, use the Prajna Sutra that I have taught you to protect yourself," Gu Shijio guided him. Chapter 2847. The Catastrophe 2. Fan Qianshi did not heed her request but continued to stare straight at her. "Master, do you forgive me?" Gu Shijio was speechless. "Fan Qianshi, are you threatening me?" Fan Qianshi looked down and stubbornly said, "If my master refuses to forgive me, I would rather be struck by the thunderbolts." Gu Shijio remained silent. It had been more than a month since she last saw Fan Qianshi. He was now skinny, and his beard grew significantly longer. Also, the robe on his body was dirty. The only exception was that his eyes were still bright. Other than that, he was almost a different person and looked incredibly lonely. A loud crashing sound was heard close by, and within seconds, the man was struck again. Fan Qianshi did not do anything to protect himself. He was burnt and bled. "Divine Lord, I beg you to save him." "Divine Lord, he has been here for a month. He has not left. His legs are almost decaying. Divine Lord, I beg you. Since he has such a sincere heart, please forgive him this time. As long as he is not banished, he can accept any punishment." Wu Chenyan was kneeling beside them and almost collapsed from crying. Gu Shijio sighed. She only had one apprentice, and he was destined to succeed her. Naturally, she did not really want to expel him. He had been punished rather severely, enough for him to have learned from his mistake. Perhaps it was enough. Fan Qianshi, if you can safely pass through the catastrophe, I will consider taking back my order. She finally spoke. Fan Qianshi suddenly looked up, and his eyes glistened with hope. His cracked lips trembled a few times before he spoke. Thank you, master. He immediately followed Gu Zijia's instructions to exercise his inner power. When the next thunderbolt struck him, he rolled on the floor over and over again. Gu Shijio held her breath as she was worried. This kind of event had to be borne by the person himself. If she were in her best condition, she would be able to use a unique technique to transfer half of the thunderbolts to her body to reduce his burden. However, she could not do so now, for she would not be able to suffer the blows and come out alive. This was a massive obstacle, but if he could pass through it, he would up-level to great deity. If he failed, he would be dead. Many immortals did not make it past this stage. It could be said that 9 out of 10 mighty immortals could not pass through this sort of catastrophe. Although Fan Qianshi was born different from the rest, he had kneeled for a month without eating, drinking, or sleeping. Could he really make it through? She had only one disciple to succeed her now. She had no time to accept a second one. Fan Qianshi was indeed a talent, but when he got hit by the 30th bolt, his whole body was burnt like charcoal, and he could not get up. Gu Shijio clenched her fists in concern. He would not be able to make it through if this continued. She looked up at the sky and whispered a few words in her heart. If he is the future creator of the universe, let me help him absorb part of the catastrophe. If he is not, then prevent me from helping him. She made up her mind and rushed over. The thunderbolts seriously injured Gu Shijio. Fan Qianshi was still alive, but of course, he was severely hurt. After the catastrophe had passed, he fell from the clouds with blood covering his entire body. He could not get up from the floor. Gu Shijio still looked well on the surface. But deep down, she knew that her body was seriously injured. Just by standing there, her legs were already trembling. Fan Qianshi tried very hard to get up and check on her but was stunned by her cold eyes. Chapter 2848, The Catastrophe, 3. When you recover, I punish you by making you face the wall at the back of the mountain for a year. Fan Qianshi listened to her voice that still sounded powerful. He was less worried now and agreed on the punishment. Since Gu Shijio had long known that her apprentice was going to have a catastrophe, she had prepared sufficient medicine for him. She threw the pills to Wu Qianyan and instructed her on how to administer them for Fan Qianshi to take care of him until he was able to take care of himself. She could barely stand at that point and wanted to leave immediately. Master, where are you going? There was a murmur from behind. Gu Shijio did not answer him and did not even turn her head. Swiftly she left the place. Wu Qianyan breathed a sigh of relief. She stepped forward and helped Fan Qianshi to stand up. She looked at the scars on his body, and her heart trembled. Young master, rest assured. Our divine lord is strong enough to bear the catastrophe. She must have her reasons for leaving. You do not have to worry about her. Before she finished speaking, Fan Qianshi fainted on her. Gu Shijio was distracted and stumbled a few times while traveling through the clouds. In the end, she decided to travel underground and took a deep breath before going back to the glacier. If she did not do so soon, she might die this time. She could feel the soul in her body in pain as if there was a formidable force tearing her apart. She had taken 7 or 8 pills to reduce the impact of the thunderbolts, but she still felt unwell. To travel to the glacier, she needed to go underground, but she was not good at the ground drilling technique. Nevertheless, she could usually make it through. This time, she felt unusually terrible. Moving forward was very difficult for her as she could not breathe, so she had to pull out from the ground several times to catch a breath. When she finally reached the glacier, she was already very dizzy. She started to face regular blackouts. She fell to the ground and shook her head. The matter was rather serious this time. She looked up and saw stars and birds in front of her eyes for a second, and later, she could not see anything for a moment. What are you doing? She heard someone scream in the distance. Gu Shijio rubbed her eyes. Her vision was blurry, but she could see a purple shadow standing not too far away. She tried to catch her breath to regain her consciousness. On top of her poor sight, there was now a buzzing in her ears. Fortunately, her mind was still vaguely active enough to understand what was happening. She could not think of any other person who would come to this glacier. It had to be Difui. However, she did not expect to meet him. The cold wind here could pierce through the bone marrow of any being. Gu Shijio was now very weak that she almost froze once she entered the place. Despite her dizziness, she knew that she would freeze to death here and end up as an ice sculpture. Out of instinct, she pinched her fingers together and muttered a few spells, pointing to the direction of Difui. Then she fainted. When she woke up, she found herself sleeping in an ice house, in the arms of a person. She was stiff for a moment but soon saw Difui through the slit of her eyes. He looked at her with no expression on his face. At that moment, Gu Shijio was cuddling him like a cat. His arms were hot, so when he was hugging her, she seemed to feel as though she was sleeping in a warm sleeping bag. The wind outside was howling, but the house was warm as spring. Chapter 2849. Was he being controlled? Gu Shijio rolled out from his arms like a cat. He did not react but just looked at her. It was apparent that Difui took excellent care of her. All her wounds had been carefully bandaged. At first glance, she knew that Difui did it. Gu Shijio felt very guilty. Unusually guilty, in fact. She looked up at Difui's unmasked face and rubbed her eyebrows thoroughly. What should she do now? She clearly promised him that she would never use the control spell on him, but she had done it again. Before she was in a coma, she actually took control of him and gave him a command: "Take care of me until I wake up." She sensed her body and realized that her spiritual power was almost completely exhausted. She wanted to stand up, but her legs and feet did not have the slightest strength. She was already sweating profusely, just trying to get up. At this rate, she would never be able to make it out of the glacier. She did not expect to be so weakened by the thunderbolts. Fortunately, Difui was here, or else she would have been turned into an ice sculpture right at the glacier. Perhaps he was her lucky star after all. Gu Shijio felt very grateful to Difui. She could not help but look at him gratefully. He sized her up to check on her condition but did not say anything. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio rubbed her eyebrows again. Just before she passed out, she used the most potent spell that she knew to control Difui. By right, the man should be able to think clearly, but he acted as though he was merely following a fixed set of instructions. He must have hated her now and probably wanted to shoot her straight in the heart. The man was her lucky star, but she treated him so poorly. Gu Shijio felt sorry for him. However, she could not do anything to free him from the spell because it would require a certain amount of spiritual power that she did not currently possess. Moreover, she was afraid that once she removed the spell, he would take revenge on her or simply leave her here to die. No matter which one she took, the outcome was the same. Difui, I am sorry I am. This was the last resort. After I recover, I will compensate you. I have a lot of precious treasures. As long as I have something you want, I will give it to you. Whatever you want. Difui still did not say anything, but his lips were slightly curved upward. The look on his face simultaneously portrayed ridicule and irony, but Gu Shijio pretended as though she did not see it. This time, she had to be thick-faced to survive. Her stomach was rumbling a little as she was hungry. She stroked her stomach gently and sighed. Once her spiritual power was lost, her body was no different from an ordinary human's, so she would naturally feel hungry. She knew that there were several kinds of snow beasts in this glacier, but they were very fierce and challenging to catch. In the past, hunting for beasts was not a challenge for her. But now, she sighed softly and murmured to him, "Fui, are you hungry? Can you hunt a hare for me?" Difui did not say anything and left the premises abruptly. Gu Shijio looked around the house and found that Difui maintained it well. Although it was only a temporary residence, the things inside were not simple at all. The ice walls were as clean as a mirror, and there were still paintings hung on the walls. There were paintings of mountains, rivers, as well as clouds. When the different images were placed together, It gave the illusion of being surrounded by green mountains and blue rivers. The floor in the ice house was covered with a white rug which she was sitting on at the moment. Although Gu Shijio was the creator of the universe, she was not obsessed with interior design or the maintenance of any sort of property. As long as the house was clean and neat, she had no other preference. Chapter 2850. Was he being controlled? 2. Most of the things in Gu Zijia's residence were practical and simple. When she traveled around the place, she could sleep almost anywhere, even in crowded places. She never thought that a person could live so luxuriously. Even though he was being controlled to build a temporary residence, he still made it so fine. She felt that the interior of the house was like a piece of art. It looked wonderful and pleasing. This man lived like a poem. He was extraordinary. She did not know who would have the blessing of being his wife. However, with his arrogant temper, it should be difficult for him to fall in love. She retrieved a mirror and looked at herself. Sure enough, she became a little girl now. But this time, it was more outrageous. She looked like a 12 or 13-year-old girl. No wonder it did not seem awkward when she was resting in his arms. Still, the scene seemed rather strange. This room was warm enough that she would not be frozen even if she slept on the ground. Why would she nestle herself in his arms? And more importantly, how long had she been in a coma? There were a lot of questions Gu Zijia's heart, but she could only wait for Di Fui to come back to get the answers. Before Di Fui returned, Gu Shijio encountered a few beasts with sharp fangs and claws. A few roars from them caused tremors to the ground, and soon after, the creatures emerged from the snowstorm. They had heads that resembled a tiger's, tails of a leopard, and their whole body was white. At that moment, their fangs were exposed, and their eyes were red. Although their bodies were huge, their movements were as agile as cats. It was as if they could smell the flesh and blood of her body when they rushed directly toward her makeshift ice house. Gu Shijio cursed and grabbed the sword beside her. These fierce beasts were the overlords in this glacier. A paw could easily tear a rhino's skin. A simple wave of their palm could smash a small iceberg. Although the ice house was beautiful, the ice walls were rather thin and probably too weak to defend against these fierce beasts. She stood up with her sword, ready to do whatever she could to stay alive. Although she knew that she could not hold the 4 beasts on her own, it was not her style to sit and wait for death. Bang! Bang! The fierce beasts pounded against the ice wall. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio held her breath in anticipation. She would stand her ground until they tore through the ice house. But to her surprise, the house did not seem to be affected by the beasts. Gu Shijio remained silent but quietly wondered about the nature of the beasts. Were they simply tigers made out of paper? Perhaps they only looked fierce but were actually useless? The 4 beasts were naturally unwilling to leave. They continuously slammed on the walls of the house from the outside but did not get any closer to getting in. Slowly, the fierce beasts turned more aggressive and violent. Circling the perimeter in search of a weak spot, one of their paws crashed into a gneiss block on the side of the house and shattered it in an instant. Gu Shijio was shocked as that clearly indicated that these fierce beasts seemed to be rather strong. So why was it that the ice house could not be penetrated? She got up and looked around the house but did not see any mechanism that was shielding the place. Moreover, as she already knew, the walls were rather thin. It was perhaps only as thick as a regular brick. Nevertheless, there seemed to be some sort of barrier outside the house that made it unbreakable. Gu Shijio breathed a sigh of relief and sat down again. It became apparent to her that Di Fui was a cautious man. Even when being controlled by a spell, he could still build a fortress of a house. Moments later, another shadow emerged outside the place. It seemed Di Fui finally appeared. When the 4 beasts saw him, they were pleased. They roared and rushed toward him from 4 directions. Gu Shijio was amazed that these fierce beasts knew how to cooperate to surround him. If they attacked from 4 directions, the angles were very tricky for anyone to escape. All paths were well blocked and taken care of. No matter which direction the victim hid, he would not be able to avoid their sharp claws. Sponsored content nevertheless, Di Fui did not hide. He waved his sleeve, and a long sword was formed in his palm. In an instant, many shadows of swords flew toward the four beasts. After about 15 minutes, it was Di Fui who had taken care of the situation. Gu Shijio observed everything that happened from inside the house and was slightly stifled. The tricks that Di Fui utilized were direct and straightforward. He used the same move to take down each beast and even attacked them at the same spot on their body. They were stabbed in their eyebrows, deep enough for the sword to reach the brain. It turned out that his kung fu was remarkably high. He should be the level of a great deity now. While watching everything unfold, Gu Shijio could not help but wonder if the man would strike her with his sword once he regained control of his body. Just the thought of it made Gu Shijio's neck feel cold. When Di Fui opened the door, she could not help but shrink into the blanket. Di Fui fixed his eyes on her, but instead of speaking, he threw a snow deer at the door of the house. Sponsored content: the snow deer was rather large and looked powerful. Its horns were like sharp knives, and its teeth were sharp around the edges. A deer's meat was generally delicious, but it was also challenging to hunt it because they were stealthy in the snow, on top of their sharp teeth and horns. Gu Shijio once hunted one, and never forgot its taste. As it was challenging to shoot, she did not ask him to hunt for this creature. However, he seemed to have gotten hold of it on his own. Gu Shijio was delighted, but at the same time, there was a hint of doubt in her heart. Her controlling spell was compelling, forcing the one being controlled to do what she asked him or her to do. Therefore, Di Fui should have followed her instructions instead of finding a different creature on his own accord. What happened this time? Did she make a mistake when she cast the spell? Just as she was thinking of the possible answers, a snow rabbit was thrown at her feet. Di Fui spoke in a dull and expressionless manner, "Your snow hare." Sponsored content: Gu Shijio was speechless. It seemed that the controlling spell did not fail. Perhaps the snow deer's presence was an accident. After a quarter of an hour, Gu Shijio was still quite confused as she looked at the snow hare in her hand and then looked at the snow deer that Di Fui had just cleaned. The man had a very complete set of cooking tools, grills, pots and pans, and even seasonings. He washed the snow deer and then grilled it up. When Gu Shijio last saw him, he was only able to boil an egg, but this time he could actually barbecue the meat. It smelled good and looked delectable. Gu Shijio also looked at the hare that she had baked. Although she prepared the hare, it smelled far less enticing than the snow deer. Sponsored content: she watched the venison being cooked in the barbecue and then watched Di Fui tear off a deer's leg and eat it slowly. It appeared that the man had no intention to give her a bite. Perhaps this was the flaw in the spell: the victim would not show any courtesy. With a thick cheek, Gu Shijio took a light breath and stretched her hand to him. "Could you give me one of the deer's leg?" Di Fui glanced at her and outright ignored her. Gu Shijio was speechless. It seemed that a normal discussion was not possible under the spell. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio felt that it was very shameful if she needed to control him to get one of the deer's legs. Well, since she got a hare, she decided to be contented and just eat it. While Gu Shijio ate the half-baked hare, Di Fui was already done with 2 of the deer's legs. Then he picked up the rest of the deer and walked away, but when he came back, his hands were empty. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Where is the rest of the venison? Sponsored content: I threw it out. The response choked Gu Shijio. It was such a sin. How on earth could he toss away such a delicious piece of meat? He could have at least left her a deer's leg before doing so. The only logical way to explain this was that the man must be really dissatisfied with her. Since she gave him the option, he really did not even leave her with a strand of its hair. At least there was food in her stomach now, so she could focus on other more pressing issues. Although the aura in the ice house was not as good as the aura outside of it, Gu Shijio could still absorb some of the spiritual energy in the area. Thence, she simply meditated there to try to recoup some of her lost power. As long as she could recover a little bit of her spiritual power, she would be able to remove the spell and free the man. Nevertheless, it was now more and more difficult for her to absorb spiritual power, so even after sitting for a long time, she only managed to salvage a little bit of her power. Sponsored content. Understandably, Gu Shijio was a little anxious. If things went on this way, she did not know how long it would take to restore her normal mobility. She did not want to control him for too long either, so there were many reasons for her to want to regain her energy. The longer she controlled him, the more he would want to take revenge on her. He might even treat her as his enemy, which was an outcome that Gu Shijio clearly did not want. She looked at Di Fui and wondered what the man must be thinking about right now. He did not meditate but leaned against one of the ice walls in the house. His eyes fell outside the house, and she did not know what he was thinking about. Was he planning how he would punish her once he was freed? Perhaps, Gu Shijio had to figure out what she needed to do to compensate him so that he would not take revenge on her. Sponsored content. Di Fui seemed to have sensed her intense observation of him, and finally turned his head and looked at her. The look in his eyes seemed a bit cold, but perhaps Gu Shijio felt that way because she had a guilty conscience. Nevertheless, she could feel the hair all over her body rising. Di Fui, this was my last resort. Once I recover, I will free you from this spell. In fact, it was really my luck that I could meet you here before I passed out. I feel very grateful to you. If I have the opportunity, I will repay you in the future. Gu Shijio said sincerely. Ah! Di Fui chuckled. Gu Zhijia's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him. Sponsored content. Meanwhile, Di Fui no longer looked at her but sat down and meditated. In actuality, Gu Shijio had a lot of questions to ask him about his life. If she were to ask him those questions while he was under her control, he would definitely reveal everything to her. However, Gu Shijio did not want to do things this way. In fact, the only reason she controlled him was to ensure her survival. If she went on to exploit his privacy, it would be too unfair. It was now late into the night, so Gu Shijio sensed the body but realized that the recovery of her spiritual power was minimal. She actually felt better when she had just woken up in Di Fui's arms. Did being close to him somehow speed up her recovery? She looked at him and moved closer to him before saying, "Hug me to sleep?" Di Fui did not talk but just opened his arms and placed them around her. He was so obedient. This person could only be so docile when he was under control. Gu Shijio had to be thick-faced right now, so she nested herself in his arms. His arms were warm, and a strong scent surrounded his body. True enough, Gu Shijio really felt that her ability to absorb spiritual power had been strengthened. It really worked. Gu Shijio took a light breath as she shifted her body around to find the most comfortable position in his arms so that she could continue to meditate. Nevertheless, once she got down to meditating, she realized that she could not absorb any spiritual energy from her surroundings. Would it only work if she rested in his arms? She was too weak to do anything else anyway, so she decided to take a nap. She did not expect to really fall asleep, but by the time she opened her eyes, it was already dawn. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Gu Shijio felt much better after her nap. Upon waking, she felt stronger and healthier. Gu Shijio opened her eyes and noticed that Di Fui was already awake but still continued to hug her and make her feel comfortable. Did he keep this position all through the night? It must have been draining. Sponsored content. Gu Shijio felt guilty in her heart. She rolled herself out of his arms and said, "Did I make your limbs numb? Let's get up and stretch your muscles." Di Fui did not talk. He merely got up and moved his limbs while walking around the house. He was born as an elegant person, so even when he was moving his hands and feet freely, it was still pleasing to watch. All of a sudden, he turned his head and stared at her. Gu Zhijia's face turned red instantly as she just realized that she had been observing him for a few minutes. Perhaps, this was the first time she observed someone for so long for no apparent reason. With an evident cough, she calmly moved her eyes away. Trying to look as though she was busy with something else, she inductively touched the body and realized that her spiritual power had recovered a bit. Although she was nowhere near ready to fight, her ability to move about quickly was restored. She could now freely move in the ice house and no longer sweat. Sponsored content. Based on her inferences, she concluded that his arms were the actual source of her recovery. Evidently, this person was really her lucky star. However, given what she had done to him, Gu Shijio did not know whether she should feel lucky or embarrassed right now. She could not help but look at him again and wonder what he was thinking. Di Fui stopped again and gazed at her quietly. His eyes were intensely black like the night, and when they were focused on Gu Shijio, she could not help but feel flustered. She pondered for a moment and said, "The next time I sleep in your arms, you can move about. You don't have to sit so straight as it will strain your muscles." Di Fui looked down to the ground and replied, "Okay." Sponsored content. Subconsciously, Gu Shijio heaved a sigh. She was not used to seeing Di Fui behave so obediently. Later, she was distracted by a rumbling in her tummy. It seemed that she was hungry again, and her stomach was screaming to her for a response. She really wanted to go out and see if she could practice in the cold wind to improve her recovery. However, when she went to the door, she realized that it was somehow unable to open. It seemed that the door was made out of some heavy metal, which she could not push aside with her current strength. She was still very weak, perhaps only having the strength of a little kid. Her inability to open the door on her own made her feel demotivated. She stood at the door for a moment and then turned to look at Di Fui and asked, "Can you help me open the door?" Di Fui walked over silently and gently pushed the door open for her. Then, Gu Shijio walked out to see if her body could cope with the weather outside. She shuddered as soon as she came out. The wind was chilly and drilled straight into her bones. Meanwhile, her hands and feet quickly turned cold, and goosebumps came out one after another. Sponsored content. Adamant to see her surroundings, she resisted the cold and looked around. The construction of this ice house was very secure, and it was well positioned. Behind the house, there was a giant ice cliff. There were ice peaks on the left and right of the cliff, but the space in front of it was open land. In this way, the strong wind would not cause any danger to the house. On the walls of the igloo, there was a very quaint pattern engraved around it. Gu Shijio stared at the design for a moment as she found it to be a bit familiar. She felt like she had seen it some years ago but could not seem to recall the details. "Who taught you how to carve this pattern?" She could not help but ask him. "I learned it without a teacher." Gu Shijio looked at him again and sighed. "The engraving looks very mature. It does not seem like something that one can learn without a teacher. Are you the reincarnation of an ancient god? Can you somehow still recall your abilities?" Di Fui gently smiled and finally asked her, "If I am an ancient god, would you know me?" Gu Shijio remained silent. She did feel that he looked a little bit familiar to her. Unfortunately, she really could not recall anything because it all happened a long time ago. Nevertheless, she did not feel obliged to tell him that. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Even if you are the reincarnation of an ancient god, you must have changed your outlook in this life. Thus, even if I knew you in your past life, I would not be able to recognize you in this life. Sponsored content. Di Fui looked at her intensely and blinked a few times in quick succession. Nevertheless, he did not speak. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio stepped closer to him and asked him hopefully, "Do I look familiar to you?" Di Fui moved his eyes away from her and faintly replied, "I have no impressionable opinion on people with a common face." Gu Shijio was speechless. In fact, she was a bit angry with his last remark. "I have a common face? I find my appearance to be unique." Whenever she appeared undisguised in public, she was like a beautiful landscape that always attracted attention. She would probably still look stunning even after she rolled around in a pile of charcoal. Perhaps, Di Fui just had a bad taste in women. Sponsored content. The man looked at her face again and replied with just one sentence, "I do not see it." Gu Shijio did not know what to say. Maybe it was better for her just to dismiss it. Besides, why should she care about the preference of a man with bad taste? After surveying the outside a little more, She realized that it was just too cold for her to stand up properly. She had covered herself in the thickest coat that she had, but she still could resist the chill that drilled into her bones. Just then, a gust of wind blew over her and forced her to take a few steps back. While walking backward, she tripped over something and almost fell. Subconsciously, she screamed, "Catch me!" Di Fui was very obedient and grabbed her into his arms. While in his embrace, Gu Shijio realized that he was wearing a very thin set of robes. In fact, it was so thin that it was still fluttering from the gust of wind that just passed them. Nevertheless, while resting in his arms, she felt the warmth similar to standing in front of a hot stove. Sponsored content. Her hands and feet that were almost frozen by the cold quickly warmed up. At first, she wanted to step away from the man once she was able to steady herself. Nonetheless, at this moment, she did not feel like leaving his arms. She paused for a while and decided to have a thick face. Instead of standing on her own, she whispered, "Take me to the wind vortex and let me give it a try." "Okay." He carried her and walked over. This vortex of wind was more prominent than they had ever seen it before. When they entered, Gu Shijio caught a cold, and the veins in her body were almost frozen. Soon, she seemed to be losing her consciousness and was having blackouts. Quickly, she screamed, "Out!" However, before she could finish, she realized that her mouth was frozen. Not a single word could be uttered. Deep down, she wanted to instruct him to evacuate the place quickly. But now, she could not say anything. "Oh God!" She cursed in her heart. Sponsored content. At this point, she was quite sure that Di Fui hated her. If she were to freeze to death here, perhaps he would even be happy to see it and would leave her body here. Just when she thought that things could not get any worse, Di Fui, who was still carrying her, suddenly tripped and coincidentally fell out of the vortex. Gu Shijio thought that she was going to die in his chest, but after briefly coming out of the vortex, there was hope. She coughed uncontrollably the moment that she could breathe again, as if someone who had just drowned and was revived. Di Fui frowned slightly at the sight of her coughing. Intuitively, he gripped her vest as if he wanted to do something, but he held back. Gu Shijio was still unable to see, so she did not realize what Di Fui had done. Instead, she tried her best to instruct him, back to the house. They finally returned to the ice house that Di Fui made. Gu Shijio covered herself up in a blanket but still felt cold even though she was still wearing a rather thick coat. She did not stop shivering for a second since the incident from before. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. The cold felt like sharp needles poking her all over her body, especially in her hands and feet. She wanted to meditate, but she could not even breathe well. Sponsored content. Despite the pain, deep down in her heart, she knew that she should feel blessed to have been able to make it out alive. She actually escaped death, didn't she? It was just so fortunate for her that Di Fui had tripped at a critical moment. Otherwise, she would have frozen to death out there. She urgently needed food to replenish her nutrition and restore some of her physical strength, so she instructed him again. "Can you go hunting again?" she requested. Before she finished her order, Di Fui turned and left. Di Fui came back very quickly this time. She had not even warmed herself yet by the time he got back. This time, he brought a deer and a hare again, just like before. He threw the hare to her and went to roast the deer again by himself. Gu Zijia's hands and feet were still stiff, so she could not peel off the skin of the hare. Moreover, she did not feel like having rabbit meat right now. Thence, she spoke up, "In fact, a deer is adequate for 2 of us to eat. There is no need for the rabbit." Di Fui looked at her rather sternly. His eyes were so deep that she could not guess what the man was thinking right now. To try to clear any ambiguities, Gu Shijio continued, "I don't really eat much. 1 deer's leg is enough for me." "Or a deer." Sponsored content. Di Fui still glared at her and but seemed to chuckle. Gu Shijio was anxious, so she asked, "Did you hear me?" Di Fui finally replied, "Let's order me." Gu Shijio went stiff. She looked up at him and was somewhat confused. To her surprise, Di Fui's lips were curved upward at this time. If you don't order me, how can I execute something for you? Something was not right. Theoretically, while under control, he should not be able to say such a thing to her. You, Gu Zijia's heart pumped faster. Sponsored content. Di Fui lazily stared at her and raised his eyebrows. Have you freed yourself from the spell? Di Fui chuckled again but did not speak. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio was not about to stop asking questions. She silently used a spell to give the man a basic order. Then, she looked at him and watched as he just stared at her in return without doing anything that she had instructed. Apparently, the man was no longer under her control. But how did he do it? Her spell had never failed her before. Gu Shijio wondered if it was because her spiritual power had significantly reduced. However, before she could even be sure, Di Fui spoke. You once promised that you would never use the control spell again on me. I didn't expect you to break your promise so quickly. Di Fui stepped closer to her. The aura around him was extremely intense and overbearing for the weakened Gu Shijio. She had to suppress the urge to retreat at that point. Her bad deed was called out so bluntly by him. She was so embarrassed that she suddenly felt her face heat up. I was forced to do so. I am sorry. Sponsored content. That's it? I will compensate you. How do you plan to compensate me? Di Fui looked down at her and asked. Gu Shijio heaved a sigh and opened up the storage space on her body. She took out all the valuable things inside that almost filled up the entire house. You can pick out something from any of these things. There were a variety of precious things in her storage space. All her prized assets and possessions were here with her. However, Di Fui did not even spare a second to look at those things. He kept his eyes focused on her and continued, You know what I want most. Gu Shijio remained silent. She naturally knew and understood what he wanted. He wanted her to free him from being her disciple. That is not possible for the time being. My current strength will make it impossible for me to resist being struck by lightning from the heavens. When can it be done? Perhaps in a few more years. She only had a few more years to live, so she would lift the discipleship before she was immortalized. A few more years? Di Fui did not sound satisfied with her answer. If I have calculated it correctly, after you practice for a month here, you should be able to restore yourself to your previous strength. Why should it be dragged for a few more years? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. The rate of my recovery has significantly deteriorated. I will not be able to restore my spiritual power to its original level, even with a year of practice. Sponsored content. Di Fui suddenly stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. This sudden action stunned Gu Shijio, who screamed. She was trying to break free from his grip, but her strength was weaker than a kitten to him right now. Upon realizing that she was indeed weaker, Di Fui placed a finger on her vein and transferred some spiritual energy into her body. The process seemed to hurt Gu Zijia's veins somewhat. She bit her lips and asked gently, What are you doing? Clearly, she was not at ease. Was the man angry with her? Was this his way of killing her? Di Fui looked at her little pale face and asked, What are you afraid of? Are afraid that I will kill you? Gu Shijio bit her lips and did not speak. Nevertheless, one could easily tell from her eyes that she was fully alert. Sponsored content. Fui moved away from his eyes from her pretty face and faintly said, If I want to plot against you, do you really think you will still be alive at this moment? Gu Shijio raised her chin proudly and replied, I am the god of creation. You can't kill me. This was somewhat true. If Gu Shijio were about to be immortalized, she could not be killed by anyone. Even if he destroyed her body, her soul would live on. Upon hearing her reply, Di Fui raised his eyebrows to her and asked, Are you trying to challenge me? He suddenly pulled her by the hand, picked her up, and went out of the ice house. Since you challenged me, perhaps we should settle this once and for all. I will not kill you myself, but maybe I will just throw you into the vortex of wind. Gu Shijio was shocked by his reply. She would surely be turned into an ice sculpture. Perhaps, now was not the right time to be a hero. Therefore, Gu Shijio immediately softened her stance. Mr. D, don't be so childish. You let me go now. Sponsored content, childish? D Fui questioned. Right then, he seemed to have started moving faster. Even if you throw me inside, I will not be freezed to death but will be turned into an ice sculpture. You can't take advantage of me. D Fui chuckled. Take advantage of you? Little Divine Lord, do you know that my favorite thing in the world is to take advantage of people? You can rest assured that if you are frozen into an ice sculpture, I will not leave you here to rot. I will come here after a year, and if you are still here, I will take you out and defrost you. Gu Shijio almost wanted to curse the man. Hey, a kid shouldn't be so vicious, you have to be kind. Sponsored content, a kid. D Fui was already moving as fast as the wind now. Gu Shijio saw the vortex in front of them and quickly grabbed his arm tightly and screamed, I am wrong. You are not a child. Mr. D. Brother D. Hero D. Don't be so impulsive. D. Fui's lips curved. He did not expect the Divine Lord to say something so hilarious. He finally stopped and looked at her. I thought you would stay tough to the end. Nonsense. If she stayed tough, she would become an ice sculpture. She did not want to be left here to suffer for a year. She did not leave much time left, so a year was very precious. Generally, Gu Shijio knew that she was well respected in the 6 realms, so she tried to maintain a good image of herself in front of others. However, her hand was now forced by D Fui, so her elegant perfect image could no longer be maintained. She took a deep breath and spoke gently, Mr. D is the officer in the Monster Kingdom and National Master in the Celestial Kingdom. You have a great ability, and I admire you a lot. Can we go back to the ice house to discuss your request further? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. D Fui looked down at her and saw her shivering from the cold. Struggling, she put a smile on her face. He looked at her with a hint of darkness in his eyes and said, So you? He left his sentence hanging before turning around and walking back. Sponsored content soon, the two returned to the ice house. Gu Shijio still had not recovered, so her face was pale. Her pale lips were still trembling uncontrollably from the cold. D Fui threw over a red cloak to her, and Gu Shijio wore it immediately without a second thought. She did not know what material this cloak was made of, but it felt hot. Hence, after she put it on, her hands and feet were quickly warmed up, and her pale face finally had a faint blush. What do you want to discuss with me? Let's talk. While speaking to Gu Shijio, D Fui already started preparing the deer to be cooked. Gu Shijio was stunned for a moment by his candidness. I know that you want to withdraw from the discipleship. Can you give me a few more years? Why do you want to wait a few more years? D Fui interrupted her. Based on my estimations, 2 more months of practice should be able to restore you to normal. At the very least, you will be restored to the same condition you were in before you got struck by the catastrophe. Sponsored content. Fui then glanced at her wounds and continued, You are injured because of your apprentice, right? By looking at your scars, you have taken 19 strikes of lightning for him. Your actions are indeed very heroic. I admire you for that. However, it also proves that you could still bear with the pain in your deteriorated condition. If you cancel this apprenticeship agreement, you will only be struck 9 times, which is significantly lesser than before. It is certainly within your ability to bear it. So why are you not willing to cancel the agreement? Gu Shijio was stunned by his reply. She never expected him to understand her injuries so clearly. He even knew the punishment that Gu Shijio would have to endure if they went ahead and cancelled the agreement. He seemed almost to be speaking from first-hand experience. Heaving a light sigh, Gu Shijio tried to explain her thoughts. The nature of these 2 kinds of thunderbolts is different. The thunderbolt from the catastrophe originates from auspicious energy, while the punishment for a crime against God belongs to the ominous energy. Are you trying to say that it is easier for you to resist against thunderbolts from auspicious energy? Yes, sponsored content. Have you tried? She had not. However, she remembered that someone mighty had experienced the punishment before and was completely obliterated. The image had scarred her as she did not know that such a powerful person could be disintegrated from the thunderbolt. Nevertheless, this was just a vague memory that she recalled from the depths of her mind. She could not remember the full picture, so the story would not be convincing enough for a man who was adamant that she could endure it. Sure enough, Di Fui sneered and challenged, "It seems that your obsession with taking me as your disciple is overbearing to the point where you are willing to make up excuses to deceive me." Sponsored content. Gu Shijio took a soft breath and continued, "Whether you believe it or not, what I said is true." "Oh," Di Fui sneered. He was too lazy to talk to negotiate with her this time and merely kept his attention on the deer, which he now put on the grill. Gu Shijio also felt uncomfortable by the situation. There were so many people in this world who wanted to worship her as their master, but she was unwilling to accept them. Nevertheless, this disciple that she took on actually made her feel so bad for being his master. When she thought about it, she realized that she did not actually teach him anything after took him as a disciple after so many years. Hence, it made sense that he did not want to acknowledge her as his master. She looked down at the ground and thought about the situation for a moment. Seconds later, she seemed to have decided something. "Give me 3 years. I will void our agreement in 3 years." For the first time, she gave him a specific time frame. Di Fui was actually stunned for a moment. He looked at her and saw her holding her little knees while staring at the deer in his hand. She looked sorrowful and lonely, as if she had made a big decision unwillingly. Watching her this way stirred a feeling of guilt in his heart. However, he quickly dismissed it and replied, "Good. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us." Di Fui had no intention to be her apprentice, and certainly did not want to be like Fan Qianshi. Sponsored content. Just then, he had finished grilling the venison and handed her a piece of the best meat along with a pot of sweet wine. "Come, drink this wine." Gu Shijio did not reject his offer. She ate the meat while sipping on the fine wine and sighed in her heart. Sure enough, after she gave him a firm promise, she got treated differently from the man. The meat that he prepared for her was delicious, the wine was good, and she had a big cloak wrapped around her body to keep her warm despite the harsh temperatures. All in all, this was actually a blissful moment. Perhaps, she did not need to expect any more trouble from the man? Gu Shijio suddenly felt that it would be such a bad thing for her to give up a few years of her life if it meant that her present would be more bearable. She ate a piece of venison meat and drank another mouthful of liqueur, before wrapping herself up comfortably in her big cloak and slept. When she woke up, she found herself in his arms again. Apparently, the man had fallen asleep next to her on the soft bed. She leaned in his arms and had one leg wrapped around his waist. Both of them were even sharing the same blanket. Quietly, Gu Shijio rolled out of his arms like a thief in the night, trying to think of what she might have done while she was sleeping. She remembered that she experienced frostbite while resting, and her blood did not flow smoothly. However, she had no recollection of snuggling herself into his arms. How could they sleep together so closely? This was only suitable for a husband and wife. Sponsored content. Fortunately, there was no third party to see them here, otherwise, she would not even know how to begin explaining the situation. "Are you awake? How do you feel?" Di Fui also sat up and looked at her tenderly. Gu Shijio frowned and quickly clarified, "How did I get into your arms?" Di Fui replied, "Good question. I was lying here comfortably, and then you rolled over, lifted my arm, and the rest is self-explanatory. I couldn't even push you away and had to sleep next to you." Gu Shijio was speechless. This certainly did not sound like her. But perhaps, deep down in her subconscious mind, she knew that she could recover better in his arms, so she automatically gravitated to him. Sponsored content. Di Fui stretched his waist and sighed. "My arm is numb because of you. You shouldn't sleep here. Gu Shijio replied confidently. Oh, then where should I sleep? Do you want me to sleep outside the ice house? Of course not. But you can actually build another house. I can, but I only prepared one set of furnishings. It would be a bare house if I built another one. Therefore it won't be so warm. Why don't I build one and you move out? Sponsored content. Gu Shijio remained silent. Although she did not care about living a lavish lifestyle, she was so weak now to argue with the man. Also, if she slept in an empty ice house, she would probably even fall sick. And frankly, it did not seem right for her to ask him to sleep in a bare house either, given all that he had done. Maybe it was not a big deal to sleep in the same house since no one would see them. Di Fui was not a person who liked to gossip either, so he would not spread the news. All she needed to do was to be more conscious of the way she slept. And even if she ended up in his arms again, it would only mean that her recovery would be faster. Therefore, Gu Shijio did not argue on this issue anymore. She checked her body and was surprised to find that the spiritual power in her body already seemed to be flowing mildly. She could now calmly meditate. She raised her eyes to his face and asked, "When are you leaving?" Di Fui smirked. "Are you rushing me away?" "No. It's just that I have a request." "What is that?" "If you are leaving in the next 2 days, can you leave me the house temporarily until you come back the next time?" "Oh yeah, and don't throw away the unfinished venison. I could live on that for a few days." She figured that although she was able to practice her spiritual power now, she still needed to eat. Perhaps after 3 days of recuperation, she should be able to take care of herself. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Gu Shijio estimated that 3 days of rest would be enough for her to return to her normal routine. She should be able to venture into the vortex again for yet another round of cultivation. Sponsored content. Di Fui offered, "I am here to cultivate actually for at least 2 months. Meanwhile, I can take care of you until you can take care of yourself." Gu Shijio was relieved by his benevolence and righteousness. If she only knew that he was such a kind gentleman, she would not have controlled him by using a spell in the first place. Speaking of which, she started wondering if her spell actually ever worked on him. Did he grow immune to the spell halfway through, or was he even controlled at all? Baffled, she decided to ask. After a brief pause, Di Fui decided to put her curiosity to bed. "The spell was powerful, but I found a way to build a resistance against it. As soon as you cast a spell on me, I already knew how to free myself from it." Gu Shijio was a little annoyed. "So you just pretended to be under control. Did you treat my situation as a joke?" "I wanted to see what you were going to do to me," Di Fui answered. Sponsored content. I see. So you have been pretending all this time. Why did you suddenly stop? No point doing it now. Besides, I refuse to be taken advantage of any longer. Silence filled the air for a moment. Although it was not a big deal, Gu Shijio was still a little despaired, for she had been rejected by the same person far too many times. "Are you really that reluctant to be my disciple? Do you know how many people have I rejected?" Di Fui gave her a nonchalant look. "Go after them. Why bother me?" He was right. Nothing done forcibly was going to be agreeable. Sponsored content. Humph. Someday you are going to regret this. Di Fui did not seem to mind at all. "I will never do anything that makes me have any regrets." Also, he would never do anything without reason. Everything came with a plan. Gu Shijio silently agreed. There was no disputing that. Anyway, she did not feel like arguing anymore, for she could never win. At this point, she would even lose in a fistfight. With everything said and done, Gu Shijio decided that it was time for her to drop the matter and meditate. However, as soon as she sat down, he immediately pulled her up. "You cannot do this alone. Let me help." He then pulled her into his arms and sat her down on his lap. He did not seem to any form of awkwardness despite them sitting together at such close proximity. Gu Shijio, however, was clearly uncomfortable. "I do not need your help. I can cultivate on my own." Sponsored content. She started to struggle, but Di Fui quickly held her down by the waist and stopped her from shifting about. Why are you struggling? You should know that you will recover better in my arms, Di Fui answered in a puzzled tone. Obviously, Gu Shijio knew that was the case, but she was still uncomfortable. We are not exactly close to each other. Shouldn't we keep a distance? Di Fui questioned her point. That is strange. Before this, you kept trying to get close to me, didn't you? Gu Shijio could not reply at first, for she did not know how to handle his accusation. Nevertheless, she needed to correct him. You have always been a disciple to me. I was injured, so it was only necessary that you took care of me. Plus, the minor skin contact was unavoidable. However, now that you refuse to be my disciple, it does not feel right for me to trouble you any longer. Di Fui froze momentarily. Swiftly, Gu Shijio rose and walked out of his embrace. She went to another corner of the room and started meditating on her own. Meanwhile, Di Fui watched as she became completely absorbed in her meditation. All of a sudden sense of recklessness struck him. He used to have the privilege to be by her side, but he pushed her away. As for Gu Shijio, her recovery did not happen as planned. After a month, only 10% of her spiritual power was recovered. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Gu Zijia's slow improving condition had limited her power and abilities. There were many things that she simply could not do with such a limited level of spiritual power, so there was not much point of her returning home. This left her with no choice but to stay for another month. Sponsored content for the past 2 months, Di Fui was always there. He took care of her and even went hunting for her so that she would not starve. Sometimes, he would guide her into a vortex so that she could absorb more spiritual energy. Since there were only 2 of them there, they would often talk to one another to pass the time. It appeared that the man was genuinely there to meditate too. When she went into a vortex to amass more spiritual energy, Di Fui would find himself another whirling mass of spiritual energy to meditate in as well. Nevertheless, he would always come out a little earlier than her, so she often found him standing in the distance while watching her with a crooked smile. Sometimes she would find him organizing their food supply or perusing some documents that required his examination. Other times, he would just be reading to accumulate knowledge. Gu Shijio knew that he was, in fact, a man of great ambitions. He managed to influence the development of 2 kingdoms in just a few years. The achievement alone was enough to prove his worth. Sponsored content. After capturing the respect of the people of the 2 kingdoms, Gu Shijio wondered what his next target would be. With such progress, it would not be difficult for him to bring all 6 worlds under his control in less than a century. While pondering the man's next steps, a sudden realization struck her. Gu Zijia's existence served only to protect and keep watch over all 6 worlds. But if Di Fui could somehow bring all 6 worlds under his control and government, her immortalization and absence would not make any difference. Deep down, she had a feeling that the man was born to be the ruler of all 6 worlds. It just seemed so right. The only flaw in this entire plan was his reluctance to be her disciple. Otherwise, she would be able to teach him everything that she could before her passing. In fact, Di Fui was a better candidate to become the next creator of the universe compared to Fan Qianshi. Di Fui, what do you think about my role here? Gu Shijio finally asked. Sponsored content. Di Fui was reading when she suddenly raised the question, so he looked at her in slight confusion and asked, "What about your role?" "I am the creator of the universe, a divine being who is worshipped by all." "What about that? Would you like to take over my role and become the ruler of the 6 worlds?" Sponsored content. I would not like that at all. Di Fui rejected without the slightest hesitation. Triggered, Gu Shijio continued, you are only masking your true intentions, aren't you? I can see that you are inclined to power. Otherwise, why would you spend so much effort and energy in reorganizing the monster and celestial kingdoms? As you can already see, you have greater influence than the Monster King and the Emperor Immortal and are clearly ranked above their royal status. I think you are also planning to bring the remaining kingdoms under your control, aren't you? Don't get me wrong, I do not see this as something negative. In fact, I am happy that you were able to bring peace to two worlds. The great plan of yours requires a lot of planning and effort, with many great obstacles that lie ahead. Even your safety will be at stake. However, if you agree to become the creator of the universe, the whole plan will no longer be a problem. Di Fui answered with the slightest interest. I find it more interesting if I achieve it solely with my own power. Whatever I want, I shall get. Therefore, I have no interest in taking your role. Nevertheless, he found her statement a little odd. Wait, since you are a divine being, that would mean that you are immortal, aren't you? Why should anyone need to succeed you? Gu Shijio jokingly replied, even a divine being will eventually face her death or become dormant for a very long time, as I have done for the past tens of thousands of years. If I had a successor to govern the world, it would not have become the mess that it is today. So you are looking for a successor? Haven't you already found one? Gu Shijio did not answer. Do you still insist on taking me as your disciple? Are you going against your own words right now? Gu Shijio decided to ignore his questions. From that moment onwards, she never brought it up again. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. It was a common belief that when a man and a woman work together, the chemistry between the opposite sexes would often result in positive outcomes. This belief was proven with the dynamic duo's increased efficiency. Sponsored content. Just 2 months later, Gu Zijia's spiritual power had substantially recovered by more than 20%, which was even higher than expected. Clearly, Di Fui had something to do with that. The unexpected increase in Gu Zijia's spiritual power had also largely enhanced her kung fu. Therefore, she now had access to some of the spells that she had not been able to use for a long while. Clouded by the satisfaction, the more Gu Shijio looked at Di Fui, the more pleasing he became to her eyes. She cultivated all alone in the glacier for 6 months before, but the painstaking effort only ended up increasing her spiritual power by 2%. That seemed to be the maximum that she could achieve. Never had she thought that her cultivation this time around would result in significant improvements. She suspected that the little ice cabin that Di Fui had built must have contributed to the unexpected improvement. Perhaps, Di Fui's regular embrace was part of the reason, too. They were not exactly close, so there was no way she could ask him to hang around just in case she needed him again. However, she could talk to him about letting her keep the ice cabin. After all, she needed a place to stay during her next visit to the glacier. Sponsored content. She told him about keeping the cabin, and he quickly agreed with only one condition. He requested her presence for a trip to the Devil Kingdom. Puzzled, she studied him for a while to figure out his intention. I believe that your next visit to the Devil Kingdom is by invitation, right? Anyway, you have earned enough respect for them to treat you like an honorable guest, so there should not be any need for me to be there. My presence is not required to make you look any better, so why bother? Smilingly, Di Fui responded somewhat ambiguously, are you really there to make me look better? Can't you be there just to bask in my fame and status? Gu Shijio turned her head away from him. Stop trying to fool me. I am not related to you in any way. Di Fui did not know how to answer her. He just stared at her blankly as he took another step forward. Is that a yes or a no? Sponsored content. Gu Shijio did not even look back. Relax. I only need 3 more days here. See you then. She waved goodbye to him. Slowly, she walked into the blizzard again. Di Fui stood and watched as she gradually disappeared in the snow. A moment later, he returned to the ice cabin and took a walk around the house while tracing the walls from time to time. It did not take long before a complete set of jewelry emerged in different corners. There was a hairpin, a necklace, a bracelet, and a pair of earrings. The jewelry set was the one that he offered to Gu Shijio as a gift not too long ago. He picked them up and started talking to the accessories. She is unaware that part of her speedy recovery is because of you. I know that she will eventually accept these gifts. It is only a matter of time. When I am accomplished and recognized, I will formally give you out to her again." He stood frozen for a while, trying to immerse himself in her sweet scent that still lingered in the air. With his eyes closed, he seemed to open up his arms in a hugging motion. Sponsored content. Gu Shijio was still worried about her disciple, so she decided to return to Tianyin Valley to examine his injuries. What had happened between them was unpleasant, so she decided to keep a low profile and snuck into Tianyin Valley without alerting anyone. Everything in the Tianyin Valley was just the same. The serenity remained undisturbed. Even with her absence for the past 2 months, the place was still surprisingly tidy and well organized. While maneuvering through the Tianyin Valley, Gu Shijio hid her tracks by using the invisibility spell. By merely eavesdropping on a conversation between her servants, she knew that Fan Qianxi's injuries were almost fully recovered. He was able to walk on his own and had started to work hard on improving his kung fu. His impressive achievement in upgrading his status to a great deity had also attracted many to come here and congratulate him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Fan Qianshi was a well-traveled man, so he had made many friends from around the world. Sponsored content. When Gu Shijio visited, she noticed a few groups of people coming in and out to visit him. These visitors were from different worlds and some of which were elites from where they resided. Gu Shijio was quite delighted for her disciple. Although Fan Qianshi had done something that he should not have, she could not deny that he had got the potential to be very successful. As long as she could erase his emotional entanglement for her, he would be an excellent successor to her role. Hopefully, his last punishment had made it clear to him where to draw the line. Sponsored content. Gu Shijio continued to wander around the valley, and before she knew it, she was already in Fan Qianxi's backyard. Fan Qianshi was there, but he was not alone. He was with a young lady dressed in light purple who had a lovely face and a distinct devil aura. Gu Shijio knew about her identity as she was the daughter of the Devil King. Coincidentally, she happened to be the king's favorite daughter. She was a little young, ignorant, and slightly overbearing. Yet, overall, she was not a bad person by any means. She was known as Yin Mingzhu. They first crossed paths when Fan Qianshi was in the Devil Kingdom on a business trip. The princess fell in love with him at first sight and began clinging to him like a leech, but the affection was, unfortunately, not mutual. At the time, Fan Qianshi kept trying to stay away from her as he found her affection somewhat troubling and annoying. Fan Qianshi once talked about it with Gu Shijio, but she was not quite bothered by such petty matters. A great man would naturally attract the eyes of many women. In fact, she was happy for him. Sponsored content. As soon as Fan Qianshi saw her expression of delight, he turned his head all of a sudden and briskly walked away, leaving Gu Shijio in a rather awkward situation. She was quite puzzled by the oddity of his behavior back then, thinking that he must have come to his rebellious phase as a teenager. Retrospectively, things made more sense. The princess visited a few times to see him but was never let in. This time, it would seem that he finally let her in, and here they were in Fan Qianxi's backyard. Had Fan Qianshi changed his mind? This time, Gu Shijio was interested in finding out more, so she stayed invisible and watched. The pair seemed to be fighting. Fan Qianshi remained stern, while Yin Mingzhu was obviously annoyed. It did not take too long for Gu Shijio to get a hold of what was going on. Yin Mingzhu was here to tell Fan Qianshi some news about the Devil Kingdom, which was why he finally allowed her to enter. Instead of talking about the news that mattered, Yin Mingzhu started bringing up nonsense to Fan Qianshi. She began to talk about how much she missed him, which was annoying to him. Finally, Fan Qianshi could not stand it anymore and asked her to leave. He would only expect her to talk about business matters if she intended to stay. Sponsored content. Yin Mingzhu could not hide the bitterness on her face but was too timid to argue with him, so she told him what he needed to know about the Devil Kingdom. She did not tell him everything, though, because she did not feel appreciated. She used it to make a deal with Fan Qianshi to continually bring him news about the Devil Kingdom only if she was allowed to enter the Tianyin Valley freely. The information was obviously important to Fan Qianshi, so he soon agreed. However, he also made his stance very clear. No matter what Yin Mingzhu attempted to do, he would not accept her as his partner. She would only be a friend to him. When Gu Shijiao arrived at the scene, Fan Qianshi had just made himself clear to her. In fact, everything that happened before was based on the speculation that Gu Shijiao made based on their interactions. In utter disappointment, Yin Mingzhu complained, "Am I not good enough? Do you know that I have turned down many men in the Devil Kingdom because I have feelings for you? Are you in love with someone else? Is it Wu Qianyan? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us." Fan Qianshi was irritated. "It is none of your business." Sponsored content. Yin Mingzhu clenched her fists in frustration. "Is she really the one? I know that she has been taking care of you since you were hurt. She is only a junior apprentice of mine." "Who is it then? I do not believe that I am inferior to anyone else." With a sigh, Fan Qianshi tried to calm down and said, "I have fallen for someone else. She is a goddess to me. Every little thing about her is better than any other woman." Yin Mingzhu was dumbstruck. "A goddess? Are you referring to the Divine Lord?" Panicked, Fan Qianshi quickly responded, "Don't be ridiculous. You need not care about her identity. I will only change my mind if she is married to someone else." Sponsored content. After a moment of shock, Yin Mingzhu started weeping bitter tears. "I will now tell you the same. I will never stop loving you unless you are married to someone else. As long as you are still a bachelor, I will always be around." Then she stormed off. Unfortunately, she did not see Wu Qianyan, who happened to be walking right through the gate at the same time. Unsteadily, she staggered to her feet and fell. Politely, Wu Qianyan offered her a hand to help her up. But before Wu Qianyan could even ask anything, Yin Mingzhu had already pushed her away. In a rage, she stormed out of the garden. "Young master, what have you done to provoke her?" Wu Qianyan put down a tray on the table with all sorts of medication as she asked. Fan Qianshi briefly replied, "Forget about her. Any news about our master?" Sponsored content. "Nothing," Wu Qianyan responded while shaking her head. Fan Qianshi sat and thought about the matter for a moment. Abruptly, he rose to his feet and was about to leave. "Young master, where are you going?" Wu Qianyan quickly followed. "Useless. How did so many people fail to locate someone well and alive? I will do this myself." "Young master, you have yet to be fully recovered before you leave. You should not push yourself too much. Don't worry about our master. I believe that her kung fu is powerful enough to fend off any danger. She will probably be back in a few days. You keep saying this over and over again. In a few days? How many days have passed since then?" Fan Qianshi's face was filled with rage. "I am so worried that something might have happened to her. She would not have gone out of touch for so long if she were fine. The Divine Lord's whereabouts have always been uncertain. There were also times in the past when she was completely out of touch. You should not stress about it too much." Sponsored content. "You know nothing." Fan Qianshi gave her a snort of disapproval before walking away. "Maybe the Divine Lord is avoiding you." Wu Qianyan finally said what she kept in her heart. In disbelief, Fan Qianshi stopped and turned to her. "What did you just say?" he asked in a rather unpleasant manner. Wu Qianyan could no longer keep quiet about it, so she started speaking her mind. "You know it very well. You have been developing inappropriate feelings for our master. She was completely annoyed by it, so she punished you. Young master, haven't you had enough punishment already? Are you trying to make her even angrier? Young master, the Divine Lord is our master. You should not be doing this to your master. Please, I beg you to drop the obsession and stop holding on to your feelings for her." Fan Qianshi looked at her sternly. "You too? I know she is my master, but what is wrong about that? Are there any rules that forbid the relationship between a master and a disciple? But she is the Divine Lord, the creator of the universe. She is not just anyone's master. It is incomparable." Fan Qianshi answered scornfully, So what if she is the creator of the universe? To me, she is not only my master but a woman as well. I am the only man for her, and she is the only woman for me. Wu Qianyan could not believe what he just said. Young master, you should not have said that. Our master would not be pleased if she heard it. She would punish you or even banish you again. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Fan Qianshi was triggered. With his fists clenched, he decided to look past his concerns and told her how he truly felt. I will never stop pursuing her unless she is married to someone else. Even if she banishes me, I will still come back to her and stick around stubbornly. Sponsored content. Wu Qianyan was dumbfounded. Gu Shijiao, on the other hand, was starting to get distressed by him. After weighing her decisions, she chose to leave right away. I will never stop pursuing her unless she is married to someone else. His words kept playing back in Gu Zijia's head, pushing her to come up with a solution. Sponsored content. He was the only disciple that she ever had, so his complete banishment was not an option. Moreover, banishing him would not solve the problem at all as he seemed very determined to pursue her, regardless. Killing him was not an option either. So it seemed that there was only one way she could end the entanglement for good, by marrying someone else. However, there was a problem with that option. She only had 3 years left to live. There were many things that she needed to attend to within that time. So, finding a relationship was surely not a priority. Even if she chose to marry someone else, it would only be a show to fool Fan Qianshi. Sponsored content. Besides, Fan Qianxi's keen intelligence was not to be underestimated. If she simply put on a show, there was no way he would believe it. Things would be worse if he found out about the truth. Given his rebellious behavior, he would probably be driven to do unimaginable things. She believed that Fan Qianshi would not harm the man that she chose to marry while she was around. But once she was immortalized, perhaps the man would become an unfortunate victim of Fan Qianxi's rage. Gu Shijiao did not want to push any man to his death, so the man that she chose to marry had to be single and superior in many ways. There would be no feelings involved, only business. She did not want to leave any problems for the future. Sponsored content. She wondered who would be the best candidate, so she started creating a list of possible men, but none of them truly fit her criteria. Some of them were disqualified because of their incompetence, while some were ineligible due to their personalities. Others had feelings for her, whom she would very much like to avoid. Just as she was about to give up hope, Di Fuya's name somehow came into light. Many of Di Fuya's qualities could immediately outshine Fan Qianxi's. Also, he had always kept his distance, so there was no way he would fall in love with her. Therefore, he seemed to fit her criteria perfectly. However, there was a problem. It was complicated to talk business with the man, for there was nothing that she could use to buy him over. He was wealthy enough to resist any of her offers. Also, he was already irritated enough by her consistent approach to keeping him as a disciple. He would surely not approve of the whole idea of them getting married and must think that she must have gone mad from first pursuing him to be her disciple and now her husband. So, perhaps the man was not an appropriate candidate, after all. But who else could she possibly find? She was troubled. She spent the next 2 days looking for a candidate, but could not find any. It was now time for her to pay her dues by accompanying Di Fui into the Devil Kingdom. The place where they agreed to meet was in the closest city to the entrance of the Devil Kingdom. The devil aura in the kingdom was powerful and would be harmful to anyone who was not a part of the Devil Kingdom. As an outsider, one must obtain a special kind of material, known as the devil-resisting herb, to protect themselves from the devil aura. Nevertheless, since Gu Shijiao was the creator of the universe, she was born with an extraordinary physique that was immune to the devil aura and did not need the herb. Di Fui was different from her, so he would still need it. Hence, it hardly surprised her that he chose to meet in the city. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Gu Shijio was there early and did not spot Di Fui yet. She felt a little guilty about the way she had treated him, so she decided to retrieve the devil-resisting herb for him first so that they could enter the Devil Kingdom at once when he arrived. Sponsored content. The devil-resisting herb was very precious, but with money, it was easily accessible. Gu Shijio thought that it would be just like a regular shopping day, but little had she known that every piece of devil-resisting herb was already sold out almost everywhere in the city. Everyone told her the same thing. All devil-resisting herbs had been bought by a mysterious client just 2 days ago. The amount of money offered by the mysterious client was rather remarkable. Therefore, the whole deal went down without any hassle. None of the businessmen hesitated when it came to making good money. Gu Shijio could tell that something was not quite right. Nevertheless, it did not change the fact that she still needed the devil-resisting herb for Di Fui, which was still nowhere to be found at the moment. Sponsored content. Based on her vast knowledge, she knew that the devil-resisting herb could be found on a mountain in the vicinity, but the path to get there was perilous. Only people with the power of a mighty immortal could enter and collect the herbs. However, since the devil-resisting herb was unavailable in the marketplace, she reckoned that the collectors had exhausted the supply up in the mountain as well. Otherwise, they would have collected enough herbs to replenish the ones that were sold. But searching the markets would seem even more futile for now. Gu Shijio carefully weighed her options and decided that she should still venture into the mountain for the herb. After all, the mountain was not too far away from the Devil Kingdom, only a few hundred miles. Also, she was equipped with immunity against the devil aura and could teleport. Therefore, the journey would not take long. Sponsored content. Xiongli Mountain was regarded as the holy mountain in the vicinity, held in high regard by all of the people in the Devil Kingdom. Generally, not all the inhabitants of the Devil Kingdom were well-cultured or educated, so the name that was given to the mountain clearly reflected their straightforwardness. The highest peak of Xiongli Mountain was the only place where the devil-resisting herbs were found. The mountain had some of the highest peaks in the kingdom that were all in the same lofty solitude with many ferocious beasts that scavenged for food. Apart from the collectors, no one would risk their lives entering the area. Surprisingly, she saw that there were hundreds of troops from the Devil Kingdom that were guarding the territory. Therefore, the road to the mountain was blocked. No one could possibly go through the checkpoints. Surely they could stop anyone else but not Gu Shijio. She used her invisibility skill to hide her tracks while she listened to the soldiers' conversation. That was where she found out that the regent of the Devil Kingdom actually ordered the closure of the mountain. No one was allowed to collect the herbs for a month. Sponsored content. Needless to say, the regent must be the one who had bought all of the devil-resisting herbs from the market. Was he protecting himself from someone? Could it be Di Fui that he was worried about? Just spending a few moments eavesdropping the conversations between the soldiers made Gu Shijio well informed of the current situation in the Devil Kingdom. Please visit our list novel. The Devil King was the ruler of the Devil Kingdom, but the power of governance and administration was in the hands of the regent. This regent used to be the right-hand man of the deceased Devil King. Before the Devil King was immortalized, he handed his only son over to the regent so that there was someone to care for the orphan. As time progressed, the power of governance in the hands of the regent grew stronger, while the Devil King was more or less useless. The current Devil King was a ruler only by name. Gu Shijio then recalled her birthday celebration. She remembered that the Devil King came along to celebrate with her, and like everyone else, he invited Di Fui to the Devil Kingdom but was turned down. Di Fui was unavailable to take up any jobs due to some personal matters. The regent must be aware of the invitation by the Devil King, so he had to raise his guards high to prevent Di Fui from entering the Devil Kingdom. However, the whole operation was a little exaggerated in Gu Zijia's opinion. She continued to observe the troops, but soon, a man and a woman abruptly landed right next to one of the groups of armed men. Dumbstruck, all of them then greeted courteously, Prince Xiao, Princess Liu Xiong. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. The man was undeniably good-looking and had delicate features and elegant charm. He had a paper fan in his hand, which labeled him as a typical good-for-nothing from a wealthy family. The way he smiled made Gu Shijio feel slightly uncomfortable. Sponsored content. The lady was a beauty too, with a bright display of nobility and prominence in the air around her that kept her aloof from everyone else. Gu Shijio soon recognized them. The man was the brother of the Devil King, Injusi, known as the profligate son of the royal family who made no attempts to achieve anything in his life. His only hobbies were traveling, bird feeding, and cricket fighting. The brothel was where he spent most of his time at, with many beautiful women as his companions. The lady was known as Meng Liuxiang, the beloved daughter of the regent, Meng Tianqing. She was born with talent in kung fu. In just a few centuries, she was able to achieve the level of a mighty immortal, thus gaining her the name of being the #1 talent in the Devil Kingdom. Many men had asked for her hand, but she was only interested in Injusi. She would follow him around whenever she could. The regent disliked Injusi's playboy attitude. Otherwise, his daughter would be married to the man by now. Sponsored content. Injusi, on the other hand, was reluctant to be controlled by a woman. He preferred his life of leisure and freedom. Therefore, he ignored Meng Liuxiang most of the time. In fact, he was slightly annoyed about how clingy she was, so he would stay as far away as he could. Nevertheless, his kung fu was nowhere near as good as hers. Every time he went to hide, she would always find him using the tracking spell. Gu Shijio never thought that she would see them both here today. From their interaction, she knew that the pair were traveling. However, the mountain was completely closed, so without the regent's permission, no one was allowed to get close to the peaks. These soldiers did not care much about Injusi but were intimidated by Meng Liuxiang. She shouted at them furiously, and they immediately let her in. Gu Shijio was curious about what they were going to do, so she tailed them. Sponsored content. The devil-resisting herbs were flourishing at the peak. The place became an expanse of lush green crops that danced in the breeze. There were at least 180 pieces of herbs in the field. When the herbs were ready to be harvested, the hills became ablaze with green blossoms. Like pieces of green flowers, the herbs looked very enticing. Nevertheless, it was not easy to collect the herbs as 4 ferocious beasts surrounded the field. The beasts would remain still when there was no one around. However, when there was an intruder within a 30-foot radius, these 4 creatures would be triggered into a frenzy. Right at the danger zone, Injusi and Meng Liuxiang started arguing. Initially, Injusi was only planning to have a walk around the mountain, but soon changed his mind when he saw the herbs. He wanted to collect some and bring them home as souvenirs. Meng Liuxiang was obviously against the idea. Their entry to the peak was already going against her father's will. Therefore, his collection of herbs would be a monstrous crime. Sponsored content. However, Injusi insisted that he would not go back empty-handed. All he asked for was only 1 herb. Needless to say, the two of them could not reach an agreement, so the heated argument continued. Meng Liuxiang kept using her father as her excuse to go against Injusi's plan, thus infuriating him. I am the brother of the Devil King. Am I not allowed to collect just a few plants? Furthermore, your father is the regent. The lady started talking back recklessly. Injusi, you are trying to rise in revolt, aren't you? I know everything. You are dissatisfied with my father's governance, so you have been scheming with many officials to have my father dismissed. Shocked, Injusi clearly did not understand. What nonsense are you talking about? Meng Liuxiang sarcastically replied, Nonsense? Did you really think that you could keep all of this from me? I was only playing dumb all along. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 2867, Marry Me, 2. I know that you secretly contacted Di Fui about 2 months ago, didn't you? You want him to assist the Devil King so that together, all of you can dismiss my father from his position. Injusi suddenly stopped speaking. He pinched his lips into a thin line and said nothing more. Meanwhile, Meng Liuxiang continued to lash out at him. Injusi, although my father disapproves of you, he never mistreated you, all because of me. Seriously, you should stop making yourself his enemy. Otherwise, not even I can keep you alive. If my father found out about the rebellious plans of yours, he would be really mad." After a pause, Injusi suddenly became very firm in his stance. "This kingdom has always been my family's territory. Your father is the only rebel. Meng Liuxiang, if I insisted on carrying out my plan, what are you going to do about it?" Meng Liuxiang shone her sword before his eyes right away. "I will have to kill you. Injusi, I like you, but I shall never turn against my father." Instantly, Injusi stopped waving the paper fan in his hand. "All right, do it then. Meng Liuxiang, I now offer you the chance to fight with me," he said. In an instant, he turned his paper fan into a sword. Gu Shijio was hiding in the corner, quietly observing the couple that had just turned their backs against one another and became enemies. In fact, she was particularly drawn to Injusi. Before the showdown, he used to have the attitude of a playboy. However, his character had instantaneously switched from a playboy to that of a nobleman. It was just like a mask that he had stripped off, finally revealed another side of him, matured, sharp, and grim. It would appear that the man was only concealing his abilities and carrying the image of a playboy. Gu Shijio could tell just by one look that the man was nothing short of extraordinary. It was a shame that the princess was unaware of his true colors. She had an excellent foundation in kung fu but was too reckless and naive. It would appear as though she had just dug her own grave. Injusi was, undoubtedly, a gentleman. Although his plans had been uncovered, he did not attack Meng Liuxiang right away. Instead, he offered her a fair chance to fight, though the lady might not be a match to him at all. Intrigued by the ongoing situation, Gu Shijio decided to keep watching. Meng Liuxiang had never thought that Injusi would be courageous enough to fight her. "You have just made a death wish," she teased arrogantly. She decided that he needed to be taught a lesson so that he would know when to back off. Injusi gave his sword a flick and answered icily, "Meng Liuxiang, I will do my best, and that is what I hope you will do too. Let's make it a matter of life and death." Meng Liuxiang answered his statement by launching her first strike. Thus, the battle began. There were merely 10 moves in the entire battle. 10 moves were enough to settle the matter and put it to rest. As soon as the battle ended, one of them was about to die. Meng Liuxiang was already lying on the ground, with blood slowly tracing down her cheeks. She stared at Injusi in utter disbelief, struggling to find her words. You have been hiding your true self all along." Injusi transformed the sword back into his folded paper fan and replied, "Meng Liuxiang, you are now defeated." Meng Liuxiang was in critical condition at that point. I did not do my best," she struggled to reply. Injusi spoke slowly, "You would not be able to defeat me even if you did." Meng Liuxiang did not answer. In fact, she was not able to say anything more. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.